Hi, everyone, and welcome to In the Metal. In the Metal is the only show that takes you behind the scenes in the world of independent watchmaking, and what an incredible world that is. It's kind of like a fantasy world hiding in plain sight, where some of the most incredible watchmakers work on their own to create their own brands and do their own working for some of the bigger brands, uh, creating absolutely amazing pieces. So every week we talk to one of the a personality in the watch industry, in the independent sector, the people who are the creators, the innovators, the inventors, these artists who commit their lives to creating these astonishing timepieces, and the most likely museum pieces of the future. Every week, joined from across the Atlantic Ocean by a guy who is a true heavy metal rock and roll legend who has become taken on a new life as a master of complications, master watchmaker, specializing in haute horlogerie, and a champion for independent watchmaking in the United States of America, where there is a lot of work to be done to establish a new presence there for this extraordinary worldwide industry. So, without further ado, I would like to shoot across the Atlantic Ocean to North Carolina and to see if Mr. Dan Spitz, the former lead guitarist with Anthrax, no less, 30 million album sales, 3 Grammy nominations, and now leading the charge for the independent watch sector in the United States. Mr. Dan Spitz, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey,
How you
hey.
doing, everybody? The master of gelato. That's what I am.
Hey.
That's about it. All that other stuff is a bunch of crap.
Well, absolutely, man. All these words are like aptly.
Good to see you,
Yeah, and
Johnny.
of course, I never read a word of it, so it's
Leave,
next week it'll be something else.
leave it to a writer to write cool stuff like that. You're a good man. You're a good man. You're representing your country. I'm representing my country. And today we have somebody representing a kick-ass country as far as I'm concerned. You know, all the people that we interview, it's global. You know, we want to show the independent watchmaking comes from all over the world. You know, the people that have, stomped through those Swiss desert lands and made it out the other side to come back home and represent who they are. The work that they do represents who they are through those trenches and years of study, going back to a company perhaps and working there after school and finding and creating their identity. Their identity is then pronounced to the rest of us through their art. And their art is my art. My past art was music, and now, of course, timepieces. The next guest that we have this week is just, you know, he really doesn't need an introduction. I wrote that earlier. It's kind of cheesy, but you know, but it is true in independent watchmaking. He really changed so much for so many. He broke so many barriers that were just innovative. And it's those kind of people like Peter, who's going to be on here in a second. People like Peter are not recognized till many years later when you look back and go, and you start reading about them and go, really, that dude did that? Are you serious? I didn't know that. I thought it was the other guy. And it isn't. It's the guy behind the scenes who's the guy who makes it happen, and Peter's that guy. And he just kicks ass. So
Indeed, he is one of the most. He's one of the true gentlemen of this industry. He has worked with so many different people. He has worked on so many different pieces, including historic restorations of classical timepieces. And he has what he has done in most recent times. He has almost in a philanthropic way. He has and typical of the man, I may add, he is giving again more than he has ever taken out of this industry. And we know him as Mr. Peter Speake-Marin. People would know him as Peter Speake-Marin or the Naked Watchmaker. And we would love to welcome you, Peter, this evening. How are you? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you perfectly. I can see you, and you look both dashing and wonderful.
That's right.
Supposed to be described as being kick-ass and a gentleman in the same line. It's amazing. Thank you. You've made my entire day. I appreciate it.
Let me clean the stuff off my nose first, man. Look, it is really true. I really look up to people who represent their country. Obviously, I'm trying to do that here in a completely new light, and it's quite difficult. It was quite difficult when I started this journey way back when to get my little, the official papers to be a watchmaker, and then a complication specialist, and then get into Switzerland before all the internet. But I'm from the United States of America, where they look at us like, you're what? You fix what? Something with a battery? Watchmakers, United States,
When did you
that
go,
kind.
when did you go to Switzerland?
I started I started when I was 8 years old, but to get my grandfather was a watchmaker and jeweler in the Catskill Mountains of New York. So I'm third generation, actually. But to get my papers was the day I walked off and retired from music, was in '95.
Wow.
Yeah.
You happy to have made the choice?
Oh, absolutely. I was dreaming about it for years and years, laying on a tour bus, reading every book I could get, going on stage that night. Couldn't wait to get off stage to go in my bunk to read books about watchmaking, which, it was in my blood, my whole life, like I said, because I was around it since I was a little child, taking apart Patek Philippe's. When I was 8 years old, my grandfather had me on his lap. But to get those papers we needed back then, and to get that goal to get to O-Step in Switzerland for an American, no one's ever did it before, and then to repair complications over in Switzerland, that was difficult. So, but enough about me. What I'm saying is, I'm going to throw it right back in your face, because you're representing your country, and you're doing it now in just a really killer and unique and groundbreaking way. It's something I've never seen. None of us have ever seen anything what you're doing now, but we'll get to that. But a little bit about me. But if I flip that on you and say you quit school at 17 years old, so you were dreaming way early, and you left school and you had the same kind of bug in you. So tell us a little bit about, that little journey when you were 17 years old, what you were dreaming about, and where that little journey took you.
I left school, and I was halfway through my A-levels, studying physics, chemistry, and I think economics. And I discovered halfway through that I was pretty much incapable of adding up, which in those subjects wasn't very useful. Yeah. So I didn't actually have a direction. My dad was a bus driver. My mum was a clerk, and it was only literally 25 years later that I actually found out that I did have watchmaking DNA blood, which dated back to the middle of the 19th century. But it was never a motivation, and I never knew about it until much later on. So I basically left school, had no direction, tried to get into engineering, tried to get into the RAF in the mechanical side. And to cut a very long story short, I was introduced to Hackney Technical College in London. Technical college, where they had at a time, I think it was 2 years and 1 term, course in general horology. And the quiz teacher that introduced me to it gave it to me with a sense of incredible relief that there was something that would actually appeal to me. And I went in, and the people were, it was an oddball group, and I was always an oddball individual, so it kind of fitted, ranging from my age of 17 to guys who had retired, who were in their late 50s and early 60s. One of the guys, a guy called Radbourne, he'd spent most of the last 30 years selling Rolls-Royce cars, and he always wanted to become a clockmaker. So I landed in the school. I enjoyed it. I was pretty reasonable at it without actually having to work my ass off. It kind of worked. And I never, in a sense, looked back. It went from there to WOSTEP. And at WOSTEP, we were one of the youngest groups ever to have gone to WOSTEP at the time. This was in 1987. And I found out later the reason was the school basically was running out of funding. And whereas normally you had to have had 3 years of commercial experience, they took us, a very mixed group of young people from around the world, to be able to ensure that the school would actually continue. So that was kind of, this was at a time where the industry was really in a very, very bad place. So it was not good for the industry, but it was great for us because we got to jump forward. And from WOSTEP, I did a bunch of other things, but it was probably WOSTEP was the catalyst to something which gave me a direction. I knew that this is what I wanted to do, is what I love doing. And ironically, and I will shut up in a second.
Please don't.
from that point,
I'm letting you go, bro. Don't worry.
As much as I love to make, and I always love the creative side of watchmaking, I loved helping the other students. I loved the sharing of knowledge. And in a sense, although I never did it at WOSTEP, I always wanted to be able to give what I loved somehow. And that was, there's a continued story of that, which is when I was in restoration in London, and I was restoring these collector's pieces from Christie's, Sotheby's, Antiquorum, all of the big auction houses. They would send watches to Somnol Antiques in Piccadilly. And it was there that I completely fell in love with this business, this art. And I started with an old medium format camera, photographing the watches that I was restoring, because I knew that I was seeing things that nobody else was ever going to see.
Right.
And what I was seeing was not just a watch, it was a piece of art. And it was a reflection of, as you described it earlier, the people or the person who conceived the idea, who made the assembly, who did the finishing, who put the whole thing together. Because what you look at is actually a person. You look at the part of their life. And that is what I loved doing then. And that is the catalyst for the naked watchmaker today.
And that's the catalyst for independent watchmaking, as far as I'm concerned, and modern day independent watchmaking as well. So you've run a very similar path, you know, for me to get to WOSTEP. And so people understand, WOSTEP back when Peter went and I went shortly after, was very small. It wasn't a curriculum that was instituted throughout the entire world. Antoine Simonet, who was the co-creator of the curriculum, was probably there when you were there, Peter, of course, was my teacher and was probably played a large role in Peter's teachings. He's a character. He's a powerhouse of the industry. And again, a trendsetter. And he developed this course that he wanted to implement throughout the United States, throughout the world, excuse me, we were in those dire straits that Peter talked about, where we would train watchmakers the correct way, not the Swiss way, the correct way. And when people went and got into that school, it's a very special place, WOSTEP in Neuchâtel, not just the program instituted somewhere else around the world where you go. That's wonderful as well. But there's something special about sitting in that school, and especially when Antoine was there. When you come out of that school, you're different. You're changed, because you see things in that school as well that are quite different, and you get sent back to your seat a lot. I don't care who you are. That they're sending you back to your seat. You suck, Spitz. You can't do this hairspring for. You just can't. Then try it again. Come back next week. So it is very difficult, and it pushes us past our limits. Very similar to music, when you're in a studio with a famous producer, and it's not good enough. You got to keep going and make that song better, make that riff better. You got to double and triple your same part being a human. And then you find out very swiftly, it's very difficult to exactly do something a second time, a third time, and a fourth time. So I find that really interesting that after WOSTEP, again, you went to work restoring pieces, and you saw what was back then really independent watchmaking from the past come across your bench, and realized that's art. And that just twisted everything. That's the same thing happened to me, because you'll see the same movement when you're doing restorations. You see some A shields back then or whatever they were, you know, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna fix this. But then when something special hits your bench, you're like, wow, like what planet did this dude come from? And that's independent watchmaking. And you realize there's different people out there, and it is art. What we're producing is art. So
unquestionably, yeah.
Yeah. So from there, you somehow ended up at Renault and Pape.
Well, it was a little bit more. And another thing about what you're saying about Wostep, which is like, I don't know, a life lesson, is that with everything that the school would give, it was only equivalent to whatever you were prepared to put into it. Yeah. And I don't know if it was the same process as when you were there. Probably, yeah. The harder you worked, the quicker that you went, the better the quality work that you produced. Simone would then give you more work. You could accelerate through the different stages of the course. And you went from repairing things like the Alfred Shield to the Rolex, to the Vacheron, to the European watch and clock, to the marine chronometer. And the more you learned, the more he would feed you. And I was with a group of guys. None of us had any cash, and what cash we had, we would basically save for the weekend to spend on beer. So we spent the majority, grown-ups.
Yeah.
So we spent the most of our time working, and we would work there during the day. We'd work there in the evening. We'd actually turn down the main lights. There's this crappy little radio in the corner where we would probably turn up Anthrax as loud as possible. And then there would be this in the background. And everybody was loving it. And every individual person was just lit by their lamp over their bench. Right. I mean, every person, the few of us who actually did that of an evening. So the more you actually put into it, the more you got out of it. And it was an incredible time. It
was exactly the same when I was there. And for me, what I'm finding out now, as I talk to other people that have gone to the school later and somewhat, is it's all Antoine. You know, we both know a lot about him. I'm sure. I became very close with him. He used to take me on little tool runs with me and him, these secret little garages and stuff where I thought I was going to be killed. But it was the same. He gave us all a key, 24 hours a day access. And it was maybe a little different. The way he explained it to me was Spitz. He goes, whoever's the fastest, you better catch him, because I'm gonna push him forward. I don't care how long you got to be here, bro. I know your background. I know you've been doing this a long time. But you need to kick ass on whoever's number one. So that's really what it was. You got to chase. If someone was there and they did grow up in their grandfather's store and they had proper training in hairsprings, and when the hairspring part of the course came, let's say we were doing overcoils, brigade overcoils, for those who don't know, if that guy whipped it up in 45 minutes and it took you a week, you needed to stay a long time to catch up. So I'm assuming it's the same kind of thing from when you were there. So just so everyone understands, that's why I'm trying to explain to everyone, if you can, get into or get away from your life somehow and get to do your training in WOSTEP, or now Enrique School, what's it? KHWCC. That's another killer modern school.
Yeah.
You did something on the Naked Watchmaker with Henri. He's another WOSTEP teacher, actually. So he's basically like, it's basically the WOSTEP. Let's be honest. It's a kick-ass school. It's a different learning experience. You're removed from the world, and like Peter said, you're not going to get that anywhere else. It really drives you. And look at Peter. He remembers all this stuff now, years and years later. It's part of him, good or bad.
Yes. No, it was the other big thing is that I was working. We were kids. It was like 17, 18 years old, living in Switzerland, away from home. We were living in the Maison de Jeunes, which was actually a youth hostel, recently restored, beautiful, for wayward children. So really? It was a really weird thing. So we were all of the same age group, but we connected with all of these other Swiss and mostly Swiss youths of our own age group, all who had their own luggage with them, and it was wonderful. It was the most incredible period.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me stay where I wanted either. Part of it back then was you were supposed to have the Swiss experience. So I stayed in Neuchâtel, the top of the hill by the train station, in a lady's house, in a home, where she had a few of us in there, actually. Same kind of thing, like a hostel kind of thing. She worked at Rolex doing hairsprings, as funny as that may sound, for like 20 years. So it was a good place. But there was nuns coming in and out, and it was pretty trippy.
They were real nuns, lovely.
So it looked like you paved the way for me. If you were blasting Anthrax there, those walls were calling my name.
The spirit
once again, we find another watchmaker who's a metalhead too, and I didn't even ask. So
yeah, it seems to be.
I always, because people have this preconceived notion, Peter, that like we're sitting on the top of the Le Brassu mountain by Audemars Piguet in a wood shed with another old dude who can barely walk. He's got a cane. He's like, hey, okay, take apart this tourbillon today. And that's the perception they have. And then they come to find out, we're blasting metal. We're blasting, cool stuff while we're taking apart masterpieces. So it must boggle some people's minds. But it's what makes us calm. Somebody else might be blasting Barbra Streisand. That's fine with them. And we do find that, I mean, I might blast that on a Thursday or something.
I can see that. More for you, Johnny. Definitely. I can see Barbra Streisand, Star Wars.
I have got a tattoo right here.
So Peter, we don't know your past, man. We all know the masterpieces that you created because they've infiltrated all of us. Anyone that's an independent, anyone that's a collector. There's a lot of collectors that are following this series here. They know exactly who you are. They know the mind print that you've made on their minds with your mechanics, and it's quite astonishing. And you were out of the box way early in the gate. Like when I did with my music, I was out of the box. We think a little differently than everybody else. So it's just so long you're going to last at somebody else's bench and somebody else's business. Is just so long you're going to be there. You could be a helper, but you really need to be on your own. No matter what you're doing, I don't care if you're selling a bag of rice or what it is on the corner, you're just not made for sitting at somebody else's bench and listening to somebody else. And once again, you've reinvented yourself with the Naked Watchmaker. And if you all Google that, just make sure you put up whatever block you got to put on there, because you're going to get all kinds of other stuff in your Google there. I love that name. It's something actually I probably would have done. That would have been a name something I would have chose for something for myself, because I just don't care. But you really made already a swift impact in a short amount of time and an incredible amount of knowledge. If you haven't checked it out, anyone, go to thenakedwatchmaker.com and follow Peter and see what he's doing to help others. And that's what this show is about. That's what I do here, creating my own timepiece now, is about. Representing America and hopefully getting another 2-3 watchmakers here, not to work for me, even though I will slave drive them, but to be able to use my machines to make their own masterpieces and get them on their way once they're coming out of a traditional school, perhaps in Switzerland or wherever that may be, or apprenticeship thereafter. So Peter's doing his work and hard work, that is, to pass on knowledge that for me and him, when we started, was hidden. Let's be real here. It was secret. It was hidden. It was within the Swiss borders, because he had to go there and I had to go there. We both had to go there to gain that next level of knowledge. And then there was another level. And then, how was I going to get into the complication rooms in Chopard? I'm an American. Luckily they're all metalheads, so they let me in. But it was really difficult for us back then. I really want to press that to everyone that's listening, because they think today it's the same today as yesterday, where we have the internet, we can go on YouTube, we could see inside a watch and all that. Me and Peter didn't have any of that. What came across our bench was what we learned, and wherever we went is what we learned. And there was another master or somebody there who taught us a little something or a little something. It might be right, it might be wrong, but that's how we had to learn. So we're here, all of us, to give back, and Peter's giving back in a big way here. And if you follow him and go on his site, you'll see interviews like I'm doing with people, but he deconstructs timepieces that most wouldn't even be able to take apart. So fill us in a little on your initial vision of what the Naked Watchmaker was to be, what it is now, where you're headed. Are you happy where you're at? Because you are impacting people, Peter, in a big way. I just want you to know that, because I have people on here all the time now, and I tell them how much they've impacted myself as from what they've done, and all the people I talk to around me, other independent watchmakers or people in the industry, and they look at me like with these baffled eyes, like, me? I'm here struggling. You know, it may look good, but I'm here struggling. And they really don't realize how many lives they really, truly have impacted. And Peter, you have, not just with your past, but what you're doing right now is really impacting people. That knowledge is there forever. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here. Same thing. This goes on a YouTube channel. So it's not about just today. This is on our YouTube channel forever. So we want to make sure this knowledge of that road travel wasn't easy to get where you were, Peter. Wasn't easy for me. Wasn't easy for Johnny. He's one of the top writers that there is in our industry. So these stories help the young and the youthful, or you know, on their pathway. So give us some insight what the Naked Watchmaker is, and don't take your freaking pants off.
Trust you, Dan.
You know something is coming, right, bro?
You're right, man. There goes the neighborhood.
It's, man. I mean, I was expecting that within the first 5, okay, but a basic boring thing, okay. If I had called the site, I don't know, Peter's Watchmaking School, or the School of Horology, people would probably, for the most part, fall into a coma within the first 5 minutes, or it'll be lost from their memory. I mean, or they'll glaze over, or, you know, develop some sort of mentally debilitating disease. So I came up with a few different ideas, and the Naked Watchmaker just seemed to be perfect. And I ran it by a mutual friend who you may know, Ian Scallon.
Yes.
And Ian is Australian in origins. He is the most honest person that you're going to meet. Sometimes you really do not want him to give you any kind of opinion, because he really will tell you what he thinks. And as a friend, he'll be very honest. So, and he liked it. And it was just like, there's no argument, there's no explanation. I just said, this is, you know, the concept, and this is the name. And he kind of said, yeah, that works. So in a way, Ian gave it his blessing. And then the Naked Watchmaker was born, partly because of the affirmation from him as well. And it's kind of I mean, basically, it isn't the Naked Watchmaker, it's the Naked Watchmaker, so to speak. So what I started, and what I touched on earlier with the experience in London, where I used to get these incredible timepieces and take them apart, photograph them, but then it was in medium format, and everything took days to do, and then the stuff was published days, weeks to do, and then it would be published in the BHI or the International Watch Magazine, and then it would be lost within a month. Move on, literally 30 years, and we can do things today that have never been done before. I can do what I did back then when it comes to the practical side, because it doesn't, even though the photography is not a given, you have to learn how to do it, and you have to have an eye, and it's lighting and a whole bunch of other things. It's accessible. And I'm not a photographer, I'm a watchmaker, but I have enough knowledge to be able to take the watches that I dismantle and actually record them as I do the deconstruction. Mm-hmm. And that is something that has never been done historically, ever. And it is very much indicative of the time that we are living in today, in the same way as independent watchmakers could not have started to flourish 20 years ago or 25 years ago. They existed. Derek Pratt existed. Daniels existed. These guys were there, and these guys were, yeah, they're gods, they're deities. Mm-hmm. But the ability to be able to communicate with people all over the world through the internet, to be able to take photographs using digital photography, these things completely have actually revolutionized and changed the watch world that we're living in today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
But when I began as like a self-employed person, which was 20 years ago, yeah. The reason that I was able to contact people was that I was able to, I worked out how to take everything that I was making, every little detail, and be able to record it and then share it through the different forums, of which at the time it was really the Purists and Time Zone.
Right.
And it was instant, and that was, everything's changed. Then it was really them, and today there's 100 in 100 different languages everywhere. And when I first started doing the photography, I was using my phone with a lens, just a simple magnifying lens on a phone.
Yeah.
It becomes, there are things that you can do today that have never been done before. So technically, it's achievable. The next thing is that the communication is achievable. Then people have a hunger today to understand what it is that they're buying. As important as a brand is, marketing is, having celebrities and influencers holding brands' watches, whatever size company, more and more people want to understand what it is they're putting their money into, what it is that justifies the price of a product. And also, it's just kind of common sense. If you're going to put down whether it's $500 or 500,000, you kind of want to academically know that the thing is actually real somehow. Intrinsically, the value is there. And it's not always the case, but there's a growing number of people who want that. And that is not my motivation for what I do. My motivation is because I love what I do. But it falls perfectly in line with this period of time. Now, all of that then leads to the next part, which is that in the industry, whether you're an independent or whether you're a big brand, and something that I've learned over the last 3 years is that actually there's an awful lot of similarities that run through companies. If you're a small independent watchmaker, you kind of have to do the same things as a big company. Different levels, you've got to do multitasking, grouping, chunking, sticking stuff together, but you still have to do a lot of the same things. You have to have the same basic knowledge, except you don't have to go through a board of directors to be able to make a final decision at the end of the day.
Bingo.
Yeah, and that's where real freedom comes into place. But those companies, a lot of companies know today that people do ask the question, and nobody prior to myself actually asked to do what I do. Nobody went and knocked on the doors. And because, honestly, part of it, I don't know why the doors were opened. One of the first doors that was opened was into Jackie Dro, Blancpain, and Breguet. And that was because I met Mark Hayek, and he said, sure. And other companies that I went to looked at me like I was a raving lunatic. And it was just like, there was no way an outsider, especially a foreigner, was going to come in, have access to the product. Yeah. I mean, in a sense, I mean, it's a very closed community. It was a very closed community, so that makes sense. But now, more and more companies, they literally, I want to say, give me the keys to the shop. But that was what happened with Breguet. I made a list of about a dozen pieces that I wanted to touch, I wanted to go into. And I started with the most simple, and I went to some of the most complicated. And then at the very end of it, and this was a personal thing, because it has no commercial value to them to share a new product makes sense to a company, because if it is intrinsically qualitative, if it's intrinsically quality and it's something which is a genuine product, they want to share that. But that's a modern product, a modern watch. What they let me do at the end, and I have to say, it took me a long time before the final okay was given, but they went to their collection and they gave me an original Breguet Tourbillon pocket watch with Chapeau Naturel, with fusee, made during the life of Mr. Abraham Louis himself. And I took that and I did the same thing. And there were people all around me looking at me like, how did he do that? And I even got some of the watchmakers to sit down on my bench so they could get in there and have a closer look, because the reverence, almost the fear they had of what was in front of them was extraordinary. But more and more companies today realize that what I do, and probably what other people like me will do in the future, because the door is now partially open, is necessary. And I think it will become more and more necessary in the future as well.
So just so people understand, what Peter does, if you haven't clicked already on it, on his website, is he has something called Deconstruct, and he doesn't just take apart, basic movements. Peter takes apart masterpieces, and he's kind of authorized and the first person to think of this. Instead of the past, where me and Peter, we've both done many years of after sales service, instead of us being the only ones that got to see the inside of these masterpieces, he's showing you, the world, these masterpieces. And it's almost baffling, like no one has thought about doing this before and documenting so clearly in the way that you do this, because it's a message for eternity. It's stamped in time forevermore. But the ability for Peter to, once again, he's a groundbreaker. He broke down walls, walked right into like Breguet and said, I want to take apart your crap. And they said yes. And he probably went home that night going, wait, did they really say yes? When I go back tomorrow, is that guy fired?
Please. I'll let it out, Breguet. We might want to talk to you someday.
Yeah. It's kind of like probably when Anthrax got our first big record deal and stuff, because back then they just told us our music sound like, when you flush the toilet, like, go home, little boy, come back, paint eyebrows, poof your hair up and come back, we'll have a producer make your music for you. And they didn't get it. But when we finally inked it, we went home and we're like, are we really getting that check? It's kind of like the same thing. But Peter is a groundbreaker. And, for him to get this where it is, you need to tune in. And it's especially fascinating for collectors. But also, I think you are right, Peter, what they're realizing, the larger companies that you're dealing with as well, besides the independents, because Peter also, we'll get to that, he also deconstructs independents, is they're realizing there's a new way. It's taken a very long time for the Swiss to wake up a little bit that there is a new way, and they really put a lot of clout in you. I don't know if they should have, but they did. So we commend you, Peter, for leading the pack, and hopefully many others kind of follow and build on the foundation that you're building right now, because you're building a really solid foundation, and swiftly. It's it's incredible. We get to see inside of masterpieces that normally as watchmakers we're never going to see, and we want to thank you.
Yeah, recently I noticed that you had the McGonagall, the Keole, and another amazing Irish creation to the Legacy Machine Perpetual Calendar by Stephen McDonnell, which is for MB&F, which just to be able to take apart 500 odd minute pieces and to have an understanding, because I know myself, and I hope to speak to Stephen McDonnell in the near future on In the Metal, Dan, and because I know that even creating that piece, that extraordinary perpetual calendar for MB&F, reinventing what the perpetual calendar, the fundamentals of that, the whole philosophy of it, and going back to the drawing board and starting off from the full days of the month. I know how he did, but I understand that it wasn't straightforward for Stephen either, and it took a eureka moment to make that all come together. And so to see you, as I say, as Dan said, what the Naked Watchmaker is, the Naked Watchmaker takes these extraordinary watches and shot by shot, Peter deconstructs each watch and lays it bare. Literally, you're laying it naked in its bare components. And so it gives you an insight into the complexity and how challenging it has been to create these watches in the first place. There was one question I wanted to ask you that I felt that we perhaps, because I want to go back to the Naked Watchmaker in a moment, but I also wanted to know, based on what you said at the start, Peter, about there was no obvious lineage of watchmaking or anything in your family, in your DNA. At what point did you realize, or what was it that made you realize that not only can I do this, but I am a prodigious talent? Because I'm sure, like, I know you'd be a very probably modest kind of guy, say, "Oh, I'm not," but you were, and to succeed and to establish a reputation like you have among connoisseurs and aficionados around the world as a master haute horlogerie independent watchmaker. When did you realize that you had this extraordinary talent? Was it at Mostep or was it later? You're welcome.
God, you're such a lovely man. You really are, Johnny.
It's probably when he was drinking beers on the weekend at Wostep. Oh man!
Listen, I heard this quote recently that something along the lines of talent isn't necessarily something which is given; it's something which is earned, or it's developed, it's built. And my early life was all about learning, never stopping learning. As a kid, when I was 10 years old, actually 9 years old, I used to go from where I was living in Epping, Essex, which was the end of the Central Line, which was one of the subway tube lines.
Yes.
And with a friend of mine, Simon, every weekend we would go into Central London, and every Saturday we would go to another museum. We loved going to these museums.
Wow.
And then when I think I've got a 10-year-old daughter, not a chance in hell would I let her do that.
Yeah.
It being even at the same period, there's no way I would. But there was me and my mate, we would do that, and we were like not even 10 years old. And I remember from the age of 13, I would be doing it on my own. I love to do that. And everything that I have done has always been about learning. I went from Hackney to Wostep, and then I worked for a company called Watches of Switzerland in Oxford, which covered everything from Tissot to Rolex. And then I was the Piaget watchmaker in London, where I did mostly Piaget, but also Vacheron. Then I did a stint with Rolex and Omega. And basically, I absorbed everything that I could. And the moment that I had kind of mastered it, I got bored and I moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And the longest period that I ever spent in being an employee was at Somno Antiques in London, because the learning curve was so incredibly steep. It was in fact, in antique restoration, it never ends. It's incredible. It's the most fascinating world to be in, when you're kind of privileged to have all these pieces coming in from all over the world, from all of the different auction houses, from all the collectors, because there are not enough watchmakers who know how to do that kind of work. Mm-hmm. So taking everything that I did, then going to Renault and Pappy, and then becoming independent, it was all one journey. When I started as selling my own watches with my own design, the people who were around were people like Philip Dufour, Vianney Halter. There was a bunch of guys in the AHCI, but it was tiny. And I just did the best that I could do with nothing, meaning that I didn't have money. I had a small collection of tools which I developed over many years, antique stuff which I ended up selling to finance what I did. And as I made my watches from the very beginning, collectors bought them. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of an affirmation that what I did had value. I didn't turn around and think like, I'm shit hard at what I do. I felt privileged, grateful to have the opportunity to do what I was doing, and to see that there were these collectors, often from California. But I mean, actually, it started off in Japan, then it was often in California. These guys who kind of sponsored myself, also the other makers who were around me. And then these guys actually helped nurture the industry. And these guys are kind of like the unsung heroes. We don't actually, very rarely does anybody give them any kind of credence. But these are the guys who actually nurtured. They were the early adopters of watchmaking.
Yeah.
So what I do today is a continuation of what I've always done, is to learn. And as I did in London, and as I do today, I like to give, I like to share. There was never a sense, I don't have the kind of ego that says I'm a badass, because we all are and we all not. It all depends on how you perceive yourself. It is what you believe at the end of the day.
You know, you once said something that said that was, my work is a representation of who I am.
Yeah.
And that holds true for you, and your story is certainly representative of you, but it's also representative of other independents. And I do want to get that shout out to the collectors who are really true collectors, who really love, most of them that I think I'm talking about, and I think Peter is talking about. It goes way beyond collecting a timepiece. They really are collecting art, and they really are funding the beginning stages of our art. And
they're like sponsors.
I've said this previously. I said this previously when we interviewed other people, because we hear the same story, Peter. You know, I really didn't have much money. I didn't even have a Shaolin 70, and that first person who believed in me enabled me to get my Shaolin and get going. And the next person believed in me. And if you think back, I can't even believe they gave me that money at that time. But really, it's like these collectors, they wish they could stop their life and place themselves in Woe Step and be Watchmaker. They're beyond normal, just collectors. They really want to be in it. Cross-reference again, because we do have music people following this, would be they want to be in the band, like what thrash metal, what we did to music, meaning the big four bands, was we didn't say, I'm a rock star. You can't get on my stage. Look out, I got to puff my hair. It was, mosh it up, come on up, jump off the stage. You're in the band. Like if you get something from me, it is me. If you catch my pick, that means that name on there, whatever I put on there, if it was a Simpsons dude or whatever it was, it's like because I directed the pick company, because I wanted that on there and I had someone draw it, and it's me. You're getting a piece of me and my art. And that's what independent watchmaking is. You really are buying into who we are. But the problem that Peter had way back when is we didn't have our own TV station. You guys all have YouTube now. You have your own TV station. If you haven't figured that out now, you really need to realize you have your own TV station to market yourself. Do you know how valuable that is? When me and Peter were starting, be it watchmaking or music, $5,000 to take out a little ad somewhere. You don't have money for that. You have freedom. Yeah. You have Instagram where you can post your pictures all day long. You can really get your art out there. You should really take advantage of that. Don't just shush it under the rug kind of thing. Really utilize that self if you're a young watchmaker starting out to transmit your art of who you are. You're hearing these stories from all these people, and they're starting to sound somewhat similar. Most of us, like Peter, we don't want the accolades. We don't want to be told this, that we're amazing, we're this. We don't really care. You know why? We all have extreme OCD. All of us. It's off the, look at Peter. He knows it. We're all off the chart. He said it. He said, I get bored. I can't stay there long. That's all of us. All of us that are where we are, let's say. There's people that are very comfortable. They can go to watchmaking school, come out, and they're looking for a very steady job and a steady paycheck. That's wonderful. That fits their skin. But for people like Peter, that's not okay with him. He was there to suck knowledge anywhere he could get it, but he didn't even know where he was going back then. He probably doesn't even know where he's going
I
today.
don't even know today.
None of us do. It's that OCD.
Excellent.
It's the OCD.
Excellent.
Look, you know, all musicians that are very accomplished, Peter, all of us, everyone that I've met at the top, the OCD is off the chart. Most people don't, if they're sleeping, they're like rolling around in their sleep. You know, it's just, we're all the same. And it really does transcend because we're true artists. Your brain's not supposed to really rest. It's supposed to be creating at all times, and you're never happy with yourself. And even the things you do are great, but they're really not great. You got to keep pushing forward. What can I do next? What can I do? And we're on, it's like a rat cage. We're really never going to get anywhere, but we are getting somewhere because the legacy that you're leaving, Peter, especially with what you're doing now, is it's going to impact many for many generations. It's information, and it's not going to go away again anymore, and it's not hidden anymore. And that's why I find really, really amazing about what you're doing with the Naked Watchmaker. It's never
historical record.
Yeah. What I do want to say is, and this is really important, is that some people think that the Naked Watchmaker is really for watchmakers, or it's about teaching watchmaking, and that is not the case. To become a watchmaker, it takes years. You can't go into a school and come out as a master watchmaker after 2 weeks or a weekend. So the goal of the site is to be able to share knowledge, is to be able to educate. It is not there to teach people to become physically a watchmaker. It's there to be able to help people to understand about watchmaking, which is why on the site you have the biggest section, or the first section was always the deconstructions. That's really the most labor intensive, and that's the biggest part of it. But then there's a section called making, which is a development. It's all in constant development. But the deconstructions explain how the watches work. The making explains how the watches are made. And then you have a glossary, which actually is, again, constantly in the process of being developed, which actually helps you to understand what the terms are, what the different kinds of watches are, what is a sonnery, minute repeater, quarter repeater, 5-minute repeater, half quarter repeater. Everything that is explained or shared on the site is there. So that's 3 legs. But the 4th leg, and this actually, Dan, is something that you're going to participate in, even though you don't know it yet. Okay. we have a section called people, where you have 12 questions, and everybody is posed the same 12 questions, but those people are all players who are in the industry. They're people who bring something. They can be, it can be a collector. We've had collectors. It can be a journalist, a blogger. It can be a CEO of a company. It can be a CFO. It can be a watchmaker, a designer, a technician. It can be anybody who actually plays a part, because everything else, all the other 3 legs, don't exist if you don't have the person. Everything is born inside the brain of an individual. And with those 4 legs, you have a solid table. It's all there. And that is something that I didn't even know when I began, that it was going to be as kind of coherent. And people don't obviously see it when they go to the site, but they will, and it'll become stronger and stronger as time goes by.
I did notice that in very swiftly, because that's what I like to read about. I like to read, as you can see, that's the premise of this show that me and Johnny have, is I like the behind the scenes, because not many people can get out from that person what they really and truly are, and that really is what well, for an independent watchmaker, let's say, trying to get his art out there, that's really what the collector wants. He wants that story, the struggle, like you're hearing Peter's struggle, where what he's gone through in his life to get where he is today at the plateau, and this new endeavor. Well, not so new, but new. That's what people like to read about. That's human nature. It's human interest.
They can relate to that. Yeah.
And a lot of our heroes, Peter, they're dead and gone. The brigades are gone. We can't talk with them. All we could do is, like you did, have the privilege to take apart something like that's. Like in music, somebody like Van Halen, giving, Hendrix, take apart my guitar. He's gone. He can't speak, but that guitar spoke. And like Dweezil Zappa has a piece of the guitar that was on fire that he threw into the audience at one show. and his dad, Frank, rebuilt that guitar. Now Dweezil has it. That tells a story eternally. Just being near it in the room probably would make me shake. I wouldn't even want to touch it. But you went in and you touched some Breguet stuff. So I don't know if you washed your hands or not since then, but I'd still be shaking too, bro. But yeah, I get it. It's wonderful what you're doing, Peter. We all need more of you in this world. Giving back, more of just giving back information to these watchmakers who can actually get it now. Me and you struggled, bro. We had to go across those Swiss borders and Swiss winters and those Swiss buses and live in strange places to gain the knowledge. We can't all just learn on the internet how to take apart a watch and be a watchmaker. I find that very dangerous myself, where people are using that term so loosely. I saw you shake your head a little bit. I think we're all in the same kind of frame of mind with that one. You can't. It's impossible. The knowledge that Peter has gained throughout it can only be gained through going to school, sitting at a bench, and also coming across and meeting people in the industry to see really how it's run, to birth his own brand, to find that money. Look at the story he's telling you. He did it. He had no money. He was already making his first watch. That's determination. Those are the people that succeed no matter what happens, no matter what crumbles, no matter how blessed they are. They seem to just keep plowing through and plowing through. Their OCD just keeps pushing them and pushing them. It's their personality. It's what God has placed inside them. And Peter's really doing that now. It's incredible, man. You're an incredible dude, bro. You just gotta stop drinking those beers on the weekend.
But I want to marry you. You're a wonderful person.
Listen, let's talk for a second about watchmaking schools. We touched on WOSTEP. We have the KHWCC school with Henri, which I always as well. My alma mater is WOSTEP in Neuchâtel, but that for today's people, I will highly recommend this school, because as far as I know, it's the only school that really also gives the students an opportunity to make bridges, build their own watch in the end. Obviously not the main plate, but bridges, and create whatever it was like a Simone thing. Here's a 6498. Do what you'd like to do to it, which is that person's art. And I feel that should certainly be part of the schooling in all schools. So we see the impact that WOSTEP has had on Peter, and how Antoine Simone has actually impacted all of us, because you're going to see that you're starting to see the thread of some of the people that have come on the show, and you're going to see how they all intertwine it, and they all have come from those doors at WOSTEP in Neuchâtel. And it's quite fascinating, the impact on the independent watch industry and the mainstream watch industry, what that school, that little teeny school who only takes 10 people has on our industry. For me, it's mind blowing.
No, I was going to say that I'm actually seeing Henrik on Saturday, because we have a project together. Because with what I do today, it's all photographic, which it has to be, because I can't film and do the job, so to speak. And from this weekend, we start a new project whereby of different types of pieces. And the first one is just a high quality, simple automatic timepiece. You'll see what it is later. But basically, I direct, explain, film, and then Henrik will actually go through, and stage by stage, he will actually just take the piece apart, and then everything will be explained, how it's done in a video fashion, why it's done that way, with all of the necessary specialized tooling, everything which is involved. So it goes on to another level, but it will only be by types of watches, meaning like a simple timepiece, the tourbillon, a quantum perpetual, minute repeater, grand sonnery, opposed to examples of each of those by different companies, so to speak. One of the basic differences with Henrik and his school is that he only takes on about half a dozen students. So it's much more of a one-on-one experience with him. And from what I understand, and if you go to the Naked Watchmaker and you click on the school section and you go to the school there, you have 6 testimonials by 6 very different young people, ranging from like 23 34 to 39 years old. I think there's an Australian guy who's about 39, and basically they follow a course which is already has a solid foundation, which is set, but depending on their preferences, on what they want to do, where they want to go, Henrik will actually let them do different things, or he will actually lead them. So if somebody's more interested in making the bridge, the nameplate, or wheel, he will then lead them into that technical aspect of manufacturing of individual components. If somebody else has another preference, whether it's after sales service or finishing, high quality finishing, outside of the basic core structure, he will actually help them learn what they want to do. And in a school like WOSTEP, I don't think they have that as much flexibility because they have more people as well. And it's not a criticism; it's just a different animal at the end of the day.
Well, I think well, Enrique went to WOSTEP about the time I did, so same structure as when you went. So me and you and him went at a time in that school that Antoine did similar. He did with me. I kind of went, breezed through, and then I was in the complication room.
Yeah.
He let me go, if you know what I mean. And it was the same thing when I did the 4-year Bulliver School here in America. I kind of just ripped through that. And that's the way it should be, because we all are human and we all are finding a different pathway. Someone might actually want to just be a polisher. That's what they really want to be, just the best, case restoring person on the planet. So he also, Enrique, in that school, embraces CNC, which is a big part of what I'm trying to transmit in independent watchmaking to the collectors that watch, that are interested in our timepieces, because CNC got a bad rap. They think, we buy this big machine and the parts come just spitting out into our hand, and we just like assemble them like a little kid gets a bubble gum out of the bubble gum machine kind of thing at the supermarket. So I'm trying to educate everyone along those lines that the CNC machines that we use are prototype CNC machines. It's usually one part of the time, or in my case, I built my own from scratch by looking at people and staring at pictures like from Mark Jenny or Hajime Osaka, who way back then were the innovators of that, because back then they couldn't afford CNC machines and built their own. And so I'm trying to educate people on that. And anyway, Enrique is very embracing CNC. I know there's a CNC machine in the school. It's very lengthy to learn it, but at least has it in there, and he's showing. I see he's showing, because look, the bottom line is we're all staring at you and your school, Enrique. The pictures and your blog are amazing. We're all looking at your tools, and our mouths are like, please, can I just come there for a weekend? We're all like that. But in addition to that, he's spreading and teaching how they need to utilize social media, how they need to take clear pictures when they leave the school and sell their art in modern times. It's not just learn the ancient way to take apart a Rolex and you're on your way now, bro.
There's so many different facets to it nowadays,
school.
really.
Wonderful school, and he's doing it right. He was an instructor from our time at WOSTEP. Great dude.
I'm just saying that, sorry, Peter, but there's so many different facets to the watchmaking industry now that an individual can pretty much be self-contained if you have the discipline, if you have the time to do your social media as well, your photography, to be able to promote yourself. Traditionally, things that would never have been the job of the watchmaker, they're now, the watchmaker's responsibility is now a lot broader, the independent anyway. And so, and as you're doing too with the Naked Watchmaker, is it's a constant process of promoting and sharing and growing that audience and growing that awareness of what you're doing, to show what's behind the scene, what's behind the dial of these watches. And so it's incredible. But we said earlier on that we were going to aim for about the 1 hour mark, and I just wanted to run one or two questions past you that some of the people who have been watching, and thank you very much everyone for dropping in with your comments and giving us a little bit of support and all that tonight, and for my great friend Barbara Palumbo, who wants to know if we could start a drinking game every time we drop the name of a band, and maybe we could do that in future episodes. We're a little bit late for tonight, Barbara. But one by Tom McCullough, who has been regularly watching us from the start. And I don't know, you could put it to yourself, Peter, or to both of you guys. But what is the best watch you've ever worked on, and why? I get the sense, Peter, we're probably talking about the Breguet, the original Tourbillon. And but I can't answer that question for you. What's your?
Shall I go first then?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a question that in one way can't be answered, because there are so many incredible, not only watches, but incredible people who make them.
Yeah.
And quite often one of the questions I've been often asked is, what would you buy? And it's often, for me, it's not about the watch, it's actually about the person behind it. Because I know the lives of most of those guys, whether it's a Sapaneva, whether it's a Gronefeld, whether it's a McGonagall. I know what you guys have done. So I can't have an objective view to buying a product, which is a watch, because of the individuals. And it's the individuals that have a, it's an emotional purchase at the end of the day, and it will be influenced by them. But the story, abbreviated story of one of the most amazing things that I've ever had the fortune to touch was linked with the owner. And it was a watch which was made or commissioned, one of a series of watches commissioned by JP Morgan after the crisis in America, whenever, 1920s or whenever that was. And he commissioned for each one of his directors God, I can't even remember. It was, I think it was a Frodsham, made by a watchmaker called Nicol Nielsen. And it was a minute repeater, tourbillon, split second pocket watch. It was a clock of a watch. I mean, it was a huge thing. And in America during the 1980s, there were floods in California. And one of these watches was in a safe. It was owned by a woman called, she will have passed by now. So her name is Nancy Burkett. And Nancy Burkett was the daughter of one of those original directors. And they searched everywhere to actually have that watch repaired. And they couldn't find anybody at that time. We're talking a long time ago now, over 25 years ago. And they couldn't find anybody in America to do it. So they asked Christie's, they asked Sotheby's, and all of the arrows pointed to us in London. And I had the men in black come and interview me before they even delivered the watch, because they wanted to interrogate me to make sure that I was actually real. And I didn't even know what was going to arrive. And then one day, in like a shoebox, this watch arrives. And this watch was the most profoundly beautiful thing I think I've ever seen. It was massive. It was perfection. Nicol Nielsen was an amazing manufacturer of calibers. They were like it's like a white label thing that Frodsham would have taken, but to his style, and it would be made by Nielsen. The case was made by a company called Tom's, Frederick Tom's, which was just invisible hinges, and you could just feel it. It just oozed craftsmanship, beauty, and weight, and material, and polishing, and history. And the dial was made by, Willis. And Willis was one of the most famous dial makers of that period, going back to the end of the 19th century. And I remember having it, and there was a certain amount of damage, and we had a workshop with 3 other guys, and I got each guy in the workshop to make a component to replace the one sympathetically so that you couldn't see what was wrong with it. And most of the guys there, they all loved what they did, but they thought I was mad, because it's like, we normally don't do that. You know, everybody does their own restoration. But I wanted each one of those guys to be part of that experience.
Okay.
Everything was finished. It was amazing. It became part of me, in a sense. And it was Nancy even offered to set me up in California. We would have these long telephone calls, and she said, come over to California, come over to Los Angeles, and I'll set you up in your own workshop over here. And not for a second did I actually imagine that I would do it.
Yeah.
because I was so committed to what I was doing at that time. But it was, I think I was like 20 years old or 20. No, I was 22 years old. So yeah, I mean, 30 years ago. But that will kind of live with me forever. So that was kind of like my grail watch.
That answers, actually nearly answers a question I asked earlier about, like, at what point did you realize that at age 22, handling a historic masterpiece like that, it kind of it answers two questions. What about yourself, Dan?
It just goes to show you what you've been saying and the whole time, Peter, is whoever is interested in our art as micro mechanics or as independent watchmakers is really buying our lifelong journey and story, because that's what we buy into. You see what Peter just told you, the story. Why was he interested in that timepiece? It had an incredible story of who made this, who made the dial, who did this, who did that, the pain and suffering of that person.
Totally.
For me, it doesn't really even have to be complicated. You know, my whole goal, my whole OCD, when I started to want to get my papers, was I want to get to take apart the most complicated stuff in the whole world, the stuff that no one else can do. And yeah, I mean, I got there, but really, what I learned along that way is solidity, longevity. I saw watches that were basic and overbuilt 10 times better than thicker and better than they should have ever been built. Because they usually built by somebody. I remember even taking apart a corporate watch. Phillips flew me in to take apart. There's only like one or two of the Rolex Zerographs, which is before all Daytonas. It's the actual first single button when they were just trying to figure out how a chronograph even works, and the button wouldn't work and stuff. And they don't even want anybody inside it because like one person had ever been inside it. It was up for auction. I think it was sold as the second most expensive Rolex ever. Something like that, going inside that was very enjoyable for me, even though for me at that time, it wasn't very complicated. But man, the story behind that timepiece, who touched it, who wore it, how to get there, why is it worth these millions and millions of dollars? You know, it's the story. And that's what this show is about in the metal. It's about the story. You know, Peter has an incredible story. He's leaving a legacy for all of the future of watchmaking. And it's not just going to be in his name. It's going to be his giving back spirit, which it seems has been throughout his entire existence. If he knew it or not, he wanted to show other watchmakers what he was taking apart. It goes way back. And I'm finding this in all the people that we're starting to interview here. We have these Peter has a loving heart. And the problem with people with loving heart is usually we get stepped on, we get stomped on, we get taken advantage of. And I'm not going to go into that, but most of all the people that I'll be talking to have some of that in their history. But you know what? They can't persevere. It doesn't make them cold. I don't think these people will ever really be cold. They'll just be a little wiser around the corner with people with suits and ties and that kind of thing. I learned that early on in music, you know, cigars, suits and ties. But anyway, Peter is a wonderful person. Yeah, you learn fast, dude.
We're not victims. We're very fortunate to do what we do. Okay,
I think so.
Daily job. We just choose to do it another way, which is what a luxury.
And we also want to press that point that I keep pressing is the collectors, please, if you really do have that expendable money and you really are interested in somebody's story who's an independent, buy their timepiece, buy their dream before it's a timepiece, give them their funds, ask them if they need something else. Do they need machines? Can you afford to do that? You're helping not just that person, but perhaps that person is someone like Peter who can help someone else and another watchmaker with that great fortune. He won't take that money and squander it like somebody else would. He would actually utilize that to help other human beings and other watchmakers and watchmaking in general get to its newest and next level, which independent watchmaking is of today. What Peter is doing today with the Naked Watchmaker it's uncharted territory. He's basically like thrash metal. It's what he is. He's like he's the first thrash metal band, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, way back when we had V&A Holta, we had Paul Gerber for me, you know, those were the thrash metal dudes for me when I was wanting to do what I want to do today, which, you know, create my own movement and all that, which I couldn't do back then. It wasn't feasible. You know, those are my little thrash metal heroes. But we're now at the next plateau. Where are we going to go from here? You know, we have it exploding in Japan, independent watchmaking. We have Peter representing, you know, his country and British watchmaking. Look, not only that, look, you have even Roger W. Smith. Look, he's giving back. He's expanding, but he's taking people from watchmaking schools. He's giving lectures. He's coming to the British watchmaking associations and schools to speak. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to do that. You don't have to do what you're doing.
There's a giving culture in the independent sector, I think, you know.
We all have to give back. I mean, that's just the love.
Because you all know what it's like. You all know how difficult it is. You all recognize each other's challenges and the obstacles that are put in front of you, and that some of you make it and some of you don't. And it's, you know, there's that sort of community spirit. And particularly, Peter, as I say, I'm going to do the unpopular thing here now and start drawing this to an end. We're at 75, and I just want to say that what you've done for the watch industry, for the independents, to showcase what you've done with the Naked Watchmaker, what your new project with Enric Corpella sounds like. It's another fascinating insight. I don't know whether that's geared more for the young watchmakers or for the same wider public that the Naked Watchmaker's for. But one thing's for sure, I would love to find out more about it, and I would hope that if we were to give you a call someday, Peter, and say, what are you doing this evening? that maybe you could come back and join us again. I hope you've enjoyed this.
Danny, when are you guys next in the Geneva, Switzerland area? When are you coming over?
We'll let you know, obviously, because of the times that we're in, everything is sideways a little bit. But
do you have any plans? I mean, like for next year, semester?
As soon as possible, you know, especially as soon as I would say the second my movement is completely, fully moving, I'll be about.
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay. Because I'll tell you something, and I think, Dan, we've talked about this ourselves. I would like to take In the Metal on the road and get us a big fancy tour bus and all the trimmings. And
I stepped off that tour bus and I'm not going back, bro. That was 2008. I tried it for a second time, 2005 to 2008 for that reunion. It was wonderful, but I don't want to sleep on a tour bus, bro.
Well, here, I'll do that for a while. I missed that out when I was a kid, so you know, I'll do. No, I would love to actually take In the Metal on the road. I'll come and visit you, Peter, and go and talk to the guys that we're with and meet them.
Yep.
Travel around and get a real a sense for the sounds and smells, the people, their lifestyle, the environment that you're living in, and so.
That is part of our plan in the future, Peter, is to infiltrate further into your privacy at all costs. We do have that plan too, and come to like the schools, like we've discussed today, and you know, show people them in a different kind of light. That probably I'd be one of the few people that could kind of get that message across, because I just don't give a crap. I don't have to give a crap, and that's just. Tell it like it is. It's the way I've always been, and I will be me, telling the truth and cutting through all of the bull crap that's within a suit and a tie.
Keep it going.
Listen, before I began the Naked Watchmaker, I had developed a tendency to be obviously disrespectful, but not particularly enamored by a lot of the big companies and the big groups. I won't say groups, say the companies, the brands, because the umbrellas that are around them are not necessarily reflective of the actual companies. And the more time I spend in those companies, excuse me, the more I realize actually how not common people are, how similar people actually are, and how even if you have these large companies which have machines churning out a lot of different product, when you actually sit down and you talk to a lot of the people, maybe who don't have quite the OCD that we do, they're actually really still driven. And you meet incredible people pretty much everywhere. And it's something which I hadn't really expected, but I've come across. And there's a lot of similar, there's like a language. And it's not French, it's not German, it's not English. There's like a horological language. It goes beyond everything. And it's when you are in it as a watchmaker or a constructor or a technician or even as a finisher, it kind of brings everybody together. So when you come over, okay, and you take it on the road, absolutely see the individuals, okay, see the independents, but it doesn't end there, because it goes a lot further, and there's some incredible people. And just to finish on, and this may sound like something endlessly boring, okay, but I met the guy that runs General Rezo, a guy called Alberto, okay. Alberto is the guy who manages one of the 3 companies, I think, that makes mainsprings. And it's just like, how dull is a mainspring? And that you go through that factory and then you see how they do it, depending on the quantities of pieces that they make and the kind of clients they have. And you see how far that even they are forced to push to be able to provide their mainsprings, their materials, to a world which is changing. And the conviction that these guys have to be able to supply sometimes what are inane requests. And you find in the most seemingly dull environment, extraordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Yeah.
So what you want to do, I mean, what you want to do, you do what you want to do. But I'd just say that be aware that it doesn't end, that it's extraordinarily broad a subject, which encapsulates so many different trades, art forms, skills. You will never come to a conclusion. And that is, I think, one of the things absolutely bloody marvelous. And that's what makes it human. And that's why, as everything is important on The Naked Watchmaker, it comes back down to the same thing. It comes back to you, Johnny, and you, Danny. It's the people who are behind it. And I think that's part of why I love it. I like, generally speaking, I like people. I don't particularly like doing video chats, which is why I ask you when you kind of come over, because I'd much rather we be doing this with a beer.
Yeah, we will. We absolutely will. And you know what? Absolutely we will. I think, Peter, don't you think back with Antoine Simonet and Wostep, those days where he would take us places in those little factories and stuff, and now I think we realize why. It's what you just said. It's everyone counts. You are totally right, and those people are passionate. I remember going to a couple of dial factories that he took us to, and it was almost like, why are we going there? It would be cool, but why are we going to the second one? And I think those are the things he was trying to show us, is that passion is everywhere. It's incredible.
In the small details.
You're such a blessing to the world, Peter. You're a blessing to me. You're a blessing to our show. Thank you so much for being on here and showing us all how it's done, showing us all how to pave new roads and keep pushing forward, how to channel your OCD and how OCD is within all of us, and to utilize kindness and love to all you meet along the way, to put the past behind you, keep pressing forward, and show the world who you are and put that stamp on it. You know, you're a blessing, bro. Greatly appreciate all your time.
Indeed, Peter. Thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And so, folks, we are going to, as I say, thank Peter for joining us tonight from near the Swiss border in France, and to just to thank everybody for watching us tonight for In the Metal. We're nearly going into this, so we'd like to think that we'll see you again next week, and when we will have another of the great personalities of the independent watchmaking industry, to give us a bit of an insight into their lives and to what rocks them, and to have a look at what they're doing, and also to keep a tab on what our friend Dan is doing with his new movement. We didn't get talking a lot about that this time round, but next time for sure we'll do another catch up. Peter, on behalf of myself, Johnny, you know I've been writing about you guys for a long time, and so it's a real privilege to have you on tonight, and thank you so much. And to Daniela for helping facilitate all this. Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll catch you again. All the best, folks. We'll see you next time around on In the Metal. Bye.